Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study that is looking at the biblical evidence for the end in the year 2033. And as part of that, we've begun a study in the book of Jonah. This is study number 10 in Jonah chapter 1. And I'll read from verse 1. Now the word of Jehovah came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of Jehovah, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of Jehovah. All right. So we've talked about the name Jonah and his father's name Amittai, and we've looked at the fact that God speaks of the wickedness of Nineveh. Now let's spend some time looking at the name Nineveh, the name of the city, Nineveh, and let's see what we can find out about it. Now, to begin with, Nineveh was the capital city of the Assyrians. And we read in Genesis chapter 10 of the man named Asher who built Nineveh. It says in Genesis 10, verse 8, I'll start reading there. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before Jehovah. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Jehovah. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asher, and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah. All right, so Asher is where the name Syrian comes from, and it says that Asher came out of the land of Babel, which of course is an early way of expressing Babylon. The Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, it says in verse 1, and the whole earth was of one language and one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And in verse 9 of Genesis 11, it says, therefore is the name of it called Babel, because Jehovah did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did Jehovah scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So the tower which was in Shinar, and Shinar is also mentioned here, the tower that was in Shinar, when God confounded the languages of all the people who were of one language, one speech, they were united. Once God confounded their language, he called it Babel. And it's very curious that at the time of the end, Babylon takes upon the significance of the nations of the world. And God, once again, at a point when the nations were coming together, at Satan's loosing, all the nations were serving him, worshiping him. like never before. And he even managed to get control of the church only at the allowance of God. And there was this unity that was developing. The whole one world government idea was making progress, and Satan would be this in behind the scenes in the spiritual realm, the supreme ruler over all. And as long as that great tribulation was ongoing, that's the way it worked out. The evil one and his dark kingdom was triumphant for 23 years, but then came May 21, 2011. Christ took the kingdoms of this world and deposed Satan, and all of a sudden we have division. We have all kinds of division taking place amongst the people of the world, within all the nations, in numerous ways, and it is very similar to the building of the tower. There was this unity, but then God confounded them, and it brought division. And then later, in the days of Peleg, he literally divided the earth, and split the continents, and man went off into separate areas. But the division of the Tower of Babel, a judgment. The division in this official day of the wrath of God, Judgment Day, part of the judgment. But as far as Asher, he went out of that land. We're told he went forth out of Babel, out of Shinar. In Zechariah 5, we find a reference to Shinar in verse 11, where we read Zechariah 5, in verse 11, and he said unto me, the question was asked, well, where are you taking just so you know what's going on here, if we back up in verse 6, and I said, what is it? And he said, this is an ephah that goeth forth. He said, moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. And he said, this is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah. And he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. Then lifted I up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, to build it a house in the land of Shinar, and shall be established and set there upon her own base. Now, the Bible and God is very clear to establish just weights, just measurements in the Bible. There's laws that God has written. You shall not have various weights, a great and a small. Balances. Everything must be just when it comes to weights and measures, because it really represents the law of God, the justice system of God's law, where there is a equality, that there is righteousness in judgment, and so the Lord establishes laws concerning proper weight. And even today, when you go to the supermarket, you want a pound of ham and a pound of cheese. Well, you expect the scale to give you a just weight. The supermarket is saying so much for 1 pound. Well, what if they weighed down the scale? They weighed down the scale, and you end up not with a full pound, maybe three quarters or maybe a little bit more, close to a pound, but not exactly a pound because the scales weighed down. That's unjust. It's unjust. There's not a just transaction taking place. They're taking the price for a full pound. They're giving you less than a full pound. Well, here the weight was put on the ephah, and therefore there would be improper balance. I think we read of that in Amos. In Amos chapter 8, it says in verse 4, hear this, O ye that swallow up the needy, even to make the poor of the land to fail, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver, and the needy for a pair of shoes, yea, and sell the refuse of the wheat. This has to do with the poor and needy, and the elect are typified by the poor and needy. And basically it ties into a false gospel, a false unjust gospel, because false gospels are unjust. With the false gospel, you justify the wicked. And with the same false gospel, the righteous are made sad because they have ears to hear, and it just doesn't sound right to their hearing. The way that the presentation of justification by man's faith, something off, something wrong with that. Justification by the faith of Christ, oh, now you have a just weight, a just ephah. But anyway, that's what's going on with the two women, two identifying with the church, as number two is for the caretakers of the Word of God. And the church had that responsibility and duty to be faithful stewards and caretakers of the mysteries of the Bible, the mysteries of the gospel. And yet they are involved with an ephah that has a weight upon it, and therefore it's corrupt. It's corrupt. And no surprise, where are you taking it? To build it a house. Judgment begins at the house of God. To build it a house in the land of Shinar, the church in Babylon. Satan has overcome the churches and congregations, and Satan is typified by the king of Babylon, and so the church itself, like Judah historically before it, Judah was annexed and became a province of historical Babylon. The church is annexed by Satan and his evil kingdom and becomes another province of this world under the power and authority of Satan. Well, here we see that Asher came out of the land of Babel, of Shinar, Babylon, and built he built Nineveh, and let's see exactly how it's worded. In verse 11, Genesis 10, out of that land went forth Asher and builded Nineveh and the city Rehoboth and Calah. We can see a relationship between Babylon and Nineveh and Asher, which he's the founder of the Assyrians. And God basically follows up on that relationship. If we go to Jeremiah 50, he joins the king of Babylon and the king of Nineveh together, insofar as both have come against his people. In Jeremiah 50, it says, In verse 17, Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First, the king of Assyria hath devoured him. And last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has broken his bones. Therefore, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land as I have punished the king of Assyria. If you know your biblical history, you recall that Israel split. 10 tribes went who were in the north, became their own nation called Israel, also known as Samaria, and the rest remained Judah in the south. Well, after a while, all the kings of Israel were wicked kings, and God, he's patient. He puts up with apostasy for a time, but the time came where God determined to visit in judgment, and he raised up the Assyrians and the king of Assyria to destroy Israel in the north. They were totally destroyed, and the remnant of the people of Israel were moved out of their land, and they went to inhabit other lands. And the king of Assyria took people from other nations he had conquered and implanted them into the land of Israel, and these people became the Samaritans. And it's the reason why the Jews in the New Testament period, in the Gospels, are said to have no dealings with the Samaritans. The Jews, they did not believe that the Samaritans were true Jews. They understood the history. They knew they were transplanted. They were taken from this nation and that nation. Now in Ezra chapter 4, when the Jews come out of Babylon, return to the land to build the temple, this would be the second temple, Zerubbabel's temple. We read in Ezra 4 in verse 1, now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto Jehovah God of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, let us build with you, for we seek your God as ye do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Assur-Haddon, king of Assur, which brought us up hither. The reference to Assur, remember the founder of Assyria, his name was Assur or Ashur, and this is the word Assyrian here, the king of Assyria, which brought us up hither. These adversaries were round about the city Jerusalem and the Jews that had returned to the land. They wanted to build, but there's a recognition, no, you're not the people of God. They were actually adversaries. They were enemies of God, and so we see that here. We also see, if we go back to 2 Kings chapter 18, that the Assyrians did destroy Israel. 2 Kings 18, verse 9, and it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years they took it, even in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken, and the king of Assyria did carry away Israel unto Assyria, and put them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, because they obeyed not the voice of Jehovah their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses the servant of Jehovah commanded, and would not hear them nor do them. That's the end of Israel in the north, and it happened in the year 709 BC, which was the 6th year of Hezekiah. Hezekiah began to reign 715, and that was in the 9th year of Hoshea. And interestingly, after the destruction of Israel in 709 BC, Hezekiah, due to the extension of time that God would give him of 15 years, would reign 23 more years. And that's a tribulation number. But the point is, Babylon and Assyria, very similar. Very similar as far as their spiritual typology, the spiritual picture they represent. Even the king. The king of the Assyrians who conquered Israel would typify Satan. The king of Babylon who conquered Judah would typify Satan. Now, it's not always the case with the king of Assyria, as we'll see in the book of Jonah, the king of the Ninevites, who would be the king of Assyria, he sat in sackcloth and ashes. So there is a distinction there, and sometimes God does that. Just think of Pharaoh. Pharaoh normally himself typifies Satan, but the Pharaoh who brought Joseph out of prison and made him second in command of Egypt, that's not Satan. That's not a picture of Satan. That would be a picture of God. Well, just one last verse, and this is really the big verse that establishes that Nineveh is a type and figure of the world, or the kingdom of Satan, as we read in Nahum chapter 1, Nahum 1, verse 1, the burden of Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. God is jealous and Jehovah revengeth. Jehovah revengeth and is furious. Jehovah will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. Jehovah is slow to anger and great in power, and will not at all quit the wicked. Jehovah hath his way in the whirlwind, and in the storm, in the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebuketh the sea, and maketh it dry, and drieth up all the rivers. Bashan languisheth, and Carmel, and the flower of Lebanon languisheth. The mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burned at his presence, yea, the world and all that dwell therein. The burden of Nineveh leads right into the earth that is burned at his presence and the world. Just as the burden of Babylon in Isaiah 13 likewise leads into a direct discussion of Judgment Day and the end of the world.
Thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.